Welcome. Today we will be focusing on my data action plan for grade 10 government class. My name is Kevin Svidron and I've been teaching for Mount Pleasant Area School District for 27 years. We start by focusing on the mission and vision statement of our district. It is our mission to inspire and support student growth and development while setting high standards for actively engaging all stakeholders through inclusive, innovative, and relevant educational experiences. SMART goals can be particularly useful in education, as they provide a clear framework for setting and achieving academic and career objectives. Using SMART goals can help students to stay motivated, focused, and on track to achieving academic and career artifacts as well as objectives. The department goal for grade 10 government will be to work collaboratively with my cohorts to develop an action plan that addresses the need for actively improving the Act 35 assessment proficiency. Currently, in order to graduate in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, all high school students must pass what amounts to a citizenship test with a score of at least 70% that is developed by the local educational assessment team. The Mount Pleasant School District assigned the government teachers to complete this task back in 2020. This test must be administered at least once to students during grades 7 through 12 with a focus on United States history, government, and civics that includes the nature, purpose, principles, and structure of United States constitutional democracy, the principles, operations, and documents of United States government, and the rights and responsibilities of every citizen. The grade 10 social studies supporting SMART goal will be to have students comprehend the four main parts of the Constitution that can easily be applied to the Act 35 exam. The four main parts are the preamble, the articles, the Bill of Rights, and Amendments 11 through 27. We could chunk these even further, but I have found that learners remember the constitutional divisions better this way. A lengthy first goal is to have the learners understand the wide world of the electoral process, the campaigns, how voting works, and civic engagement during elections. With the assistance of PA Civics and other government subsidized websites, students have an opportunity to revisit that which they find difficult to grasp. They can come back and use this site at any time. My second goal is to have students learn about the many key functions of Article 1, which addresses our legislative branch. This includes becoming a senator or representative, where tax dollars go, to even things like why our Congress is so divided on issues. Finally, students will examine the judicial branch from the dichotomy and makeup of the court to why we have juries, the types of juries, and we will study in depth the various Supreme Court cases that have shaped our country and at times politically divided its citizens. If we take a look at past data results, you can see there is a need to improve the scores. Scores have a way of being predictable as long as all variables remain the same. That can include prior knowledge, testing location, materials learned, and how that material was presented. In the school year ending in 2022, the sophomore class took a pre assessment of 50 questions with four possible choices. The test was a culmination of government, Pennsylvania Standards Aligned System, and locally developed questions with a remarkable average score of just over 76%, but a perfect bell curve, which happens to be unacceptable. That same test was given in the spring of 2022. The only difference is that we had a transfer student take the test that was not present in the fall. Scores nearly went up 11%, but more importantly, we dissolved the bell curve and witnessed a stark improvement of overall scores. To focus my instruction, I took the 10 most missed questions and found ways to interject lessons without actually teaching the answers. I wanted the learners to have a basis of knowledge, so I changed my lesson plans around. Here you can see the most widely missed question by 75% of the student body was, who is the commander in chief of the military? When we jump to the post assessment, you can see that almost 76% of the learners fully understand the president's role. There were some questions, though, that students just did not pick up on, especially the role of Benjamin Franklin. Most of our students have a misperception that he was a president due to him being on the $100 bill. The other distractors include inventing the airplane and being the youngest at the Constitutional Convention. As you can see, only 44% picked up that he was a diplomat and founding father. This overlay of student growth, in which blue represents the pre-assessment and the gray the final assessment, can give us a quick snapshot of how students are doing. This partial graph shows test scores in which growth and decline are easily accessible. Those who scored perfect are also noted. If you do score perfect, you earn a certificate of that accomplishment. This graph is an easy way for me to actively keep track of achievement and question why some may have scored worse the second time around. And that leads me to what we need to know. Where do learners get their knowledge? If we take a look at backward mapping, we want to find where material is introduced, where it should be reinforced, and who is responsible for the mastery learning, which is the final leg of the student journey for that standard, at least in high school. With everything I mentioned, this will be my ongoing SMART goal. Students will actively participate in creating an amendment booklet that outlines the rights of all Americans and is separated into four cognitive sections: the preamble, the articles, the Bill of Rights, and amendments 11 through 27. This booklet will focus on the foundations listed within the citizenship test that we give in our country. The content will be the mastery level to correspond with my colleagues who are focusing on the introduction and reinforcement of the three main pillars of citizenship: knowledge, skills, and action. And lastly, this is the citizenship test that is given to any immigrant wishing to obtain U.S. citizenship. This is what our plan is modeled after. To correspond with my SMART goal, I have listed the mastery level standards and broke each down to further hold learners accountable for their own education. My focus is on the principles and documents of government and the rights and responsibilities of each citizen. And that takes us to the who, what, when, why, and which for specifics. The who. All 10th grade students enrolled in Mount Pleasant area, as well as those currently attending our VOLA program. Even though our goal is one and done scenario, we understand that adaptations need to be made for learning support and students with 504 plans. Therefore, students will have unlimited access from remediation and testing until the Act 35 is successfully passed with a 70% by their senior year. The what do I want to accomplish aspect revolves around preparing our students to become active citizens within our state and country, a responsibility that carries great weight. In preparing students, each will create their own amendment booklet to aid in their success. The when. There will be three total assessments: the fall, winter, and spring. The fall is to gauge overall knowledge strength. The winter will be completed after the amendment booklet has been submitted, and the final attempt will begin in May. As mentioned before, a perfect score in the first attempt will earn the student accolades in the form of a certificate. Since there is a state directive, it would be nice to see something permanent on the student record. The reason and purpose this is my SMART goal stems from the fact that in 2018, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania passed a law requiring schools to develop an assessment that incorporates all of social studies from grades 7 through 12, our history, foundations of government, documents, and rights and responsibilities, to name a few. At Mount Pleasant, we focus on the three pillars of civic engagement: knowledge to have command of a structure of government and how they pass laws and make policy. We do this through U.S. history and government and through our annual field trip in which students participate in Senator for a day. The skills portion that has students learning the necessary responsibilities needed to actively participate in government. This can be voting, running for office, or even protesting. Lastly, actions: taking that mentioned and doing more. Participating at a local school board meeting, volunteering, how to get a hold of government officials, and the purpose of petitions. Focusing on my constraints, and there are plenty with a high stakes exam. I need to rely on all stakeholders to teach the standards, from the elementary to the junior high to the high school teacher. Time is a constraint, especially when looking at what I need to teach and if I have to be the mastery level for that which I need to teach. Weather can also play a part in what we do, as well as the daily interruptions from the unknown fire drill to the PA blast that occurs daily. Measurable goals: the from and to. We measure outcomes in a variety of ways, including formal and informal observations, formative and summative assessments, curriculum based probes to assess reading, spelling, or writing, and online programs such as Kahoot. To measure the desired outcomes, I provide a variety of assessments in class, projects, and assignments, as well as pre and post assessments to show growth. As you see here, I have a variety of assessments that I use: daily bell ringers, vocabulary, exit tickets, 321, Kahoot, a progress check, and I am big with Bloom's taxonomy. How much, how many, how will I know when my goal is accomplished? Repetition and use of material, seeing an inherent value to their worth, is essential in accomplishing my goals. If I can get the learners to fully understand the Constitution, break down the sections in their own words, or apply it to extrinsic situations, then this is a victory. The true measurement will be the successful completion of Act 35, in which our students fulfill the Commonwealth's mandate. The attainable, or the how of my goal. This goal is attainable and reasonable, but it will take the efforts of all stakeholders. Again, the backward mapping of our curriculum is important in identifying the responsibility of knowledge. Using the state standards for our department is critical in identifying each aspect of engagement, and if we understand the importance of this exam as a mandate, then we will begin to see consistent scores of this exam. The Constitution Project will have incremental checks for each section outlined: the Preamble, Articles, Bill of Rights, and Amendments 11 through 27. The relevance of my project. Is it worthwhile? I consider my goal to be worthwhile, especially with the implications involved of having to pass the Act 35, and for the sheer fact that we are asking our learners to do what we ask immigrants to do: know the backbone and structure of our history and government. Staying with the focus of introduction, reinforcement, and mastery of material, if we can get all educators on board with the knowledge, skills, and actions needed, withstanding the end result of this test, then the validity spikes higher for all stakeholders. Since this is a mandate, Mount Pleasant Area School District will need to remain in compliance, adding yet another level to our social studies department. Looking at the question posed, is the goal consistent with immediate and long term plans? If our goal is to make responsible citizens who vote, pay taxes, and are involved with democracy, then yes, my goal is consistent with the other goals. Time bound, the when of this project. Although Act 35 is broad with encompassing directives, I have broken my goals into three distinct periods for completion. September 15th is my first benchmark. This allows me to see what students retained in earlier grades and what I will need to change in order for all learners to be successful. Subsequently, in and around December through January, my main focus is on the Articles of Confederation, leading into our Constitutional Amendment booklet project, teaching the main components of reasons we chose a new government, the articles that make up the Constitution, followed by each amendment. As you see by my timeline, it's an extensive period of time with high stakes rewards upon completion. By allowing the learners to see what needs accomplished and when, it gives them a sense of urgency towards knowledge and completion. Applying high impact teaching strategies with a focus on desired results, I have an attainable established goal that all learners will be able to cite specifics within the Constitution, mainly from the Bill of Rights. This transfer is the passage of Act 35. For understandings, the learner will understand that each amendment has guaranteed protections, and each learner will cite one protection for each Bill of Rights. For the essential question indicator, I am well versed using Bloom's taxonomy, and I do take a few days at the start of each new school year to teach these concepts and verbiage necessary to be successful. This is the PowerPoint that I am currently using for both my AP and government classes, and each is tailored with questions that you will find in the respective content. I begin by illustrating the pyramid to which everyone has a basic knowledge, and discuss with students the need to ask relevant and pertinent questions that elicit higher level thinking skills. I begin each of the 6 levels of Bloom's by defining what it is the student, should be looking to answer. This is important as it infuses relevance into their learning and life. At which point I will give the students the verbs that are associated with each tier. So for knowledge, I may ask to describe something or show data or even tell a story. And this is what the questions will look like to the learner. What happened after the signing of the Declaration? Name the first president of the United States, or even who warned that the British were coming. Easy to recall information that has little impact alone. Building upon knowledge is comprehension, which is a demonstration of understanding. Here, the verbs laid out are things like categorize, classify, and illustrate. Questions for comprehension. Can you write in your own words the importance of natural resources in America? What do you think could have happened if colonists were submissive? Or what differences exist between the various indigenous tribes of Pennsylvania? So now you are building that knowledge and making it usable. Application. Applying knowledge to actual situations. Verbs here include apply, complete, experiment, and predict. What does this look like? With recall and explanation. Do you know another instance where a document benefited the people? The one we often use is how the Constitution protects students. And lastly, for our constitutional project, students have to develop a 28th Amendment based on prior learning and issues that plague our country. The analysis section of Bloom's breaks down objects or ideas into simpler parts, allowing the learner to find evidence to support generalization. Verbiage for analysis is simply to analyze or categorize or to discriminate. This allows for learners to recall that information, but also philosophize on certain questions. My first question here that is reserved for AP learners: which events could have happened first, man in America or man in Africa? Learners would need to harvest data and fact in order to make the thesis revolving around this question. More so, if you look at my third prompt, what was the underlying problem of a monarchy? The student has to understand all forms of government and the relationships to the people to successfully answer that. The last two tiers are and can be difficult for learners to grasp. Synthesis compiles component ideas into new whole or proposed alternative solutions. Not all 15-year-old government students can fully comprehend this tiered level. Our verbs here include build, collect, combine, construct, modify, and prepare. And this is how I utilize synthesis. Can you design an early city infrastructure to demonstrate stratigraphy? How many ways can you interpret a law? Or can you create new and unusual uses of the wheel? These last two tiers are how I involve students with GIEPs. Finally, we have the highest tier of Bloom's. Although you could interchange the last two with similar results, the evaluation allows learners to make and defend judgments based on internal evidence or external criteria. Verbiage here includes criticize, standardize, and test. How I use these in my classes come in the form of these questions. Is there a better solution to burial, cremation, or pyres? Judge the value of education before common era. Or can you defend your position about education advancing mankind? Opinions matter as long as they are defended by remarkable criteria. Once I teach the taxonomy levels, you can see how I put it into practice. Students divide into 6 groups. Each group is assigned one tier of Bloom's, and then they break the Pledge of Allegiance down with everything that I've demonstrated to you. The project is effective and learners get a better picture of why they do what they do. They are invested, which of course is the last desired result of our HITS acquisition. The HITS evidence and assessment begins with having a definitive rubric for the Constitution project. Looking at this basic but inclusive rubric, students can acclimate to knowing what an advanced, proficient, and basic project looks like. It is important to note that I do use several rubrics for learners with 504s or IEPs, and when I score, students are told that scores can fluctuate based on that criteria, so the only competition should be against themselves and not their classmates. Here is a glimpse of a few teacher-created assessments to test comprehension and application of amendments by learners. As you see, I have open-ended questions, essays, and scenarios. My unit continues to build from basic to advanced as learning occurs. Other assessments included summative in the form of quizzes and tests, and formative assessments through bell ringers, questions, and what-if scenarios. The HITS learning plan for my unit includes lectures, modeling and experience, PowerPoints, videos of me teaching, and giving examples that I don't normally do in school. This is useful also for students that miss school. I provide government guest speakers or field trips. Annually, I take students on a field trip titled Senator for a Day, in which kids create, debate, modify, and attempt to pass bills in our state. It's a program run by Senator Pat Stefano, and the late Representative Mike Reese sponsored my class. The students walk away with real-life connections. I would also say that I've helped 7 students acquire full scholarships to study 1 month abroad, from China to Aruba to Italy to Germany to France and Spain and a few other countries. Those students who were fortunate enough to be selected learned the model of those governments, but were also able to share Americans' vision of government. We also complete problem solving as part of the learning plan, along with daily bell ringers, which give students an open forum to speak. I use daily tickets and always open ended prompts so that learners give their responses based on their beliefs, which in turn allows for correction if needed. The pre assessment data that you see here is a current scatter plot of our student body. This assessment is a one and done assessment. The improvement will come later. For a standard 50 question exam on citizenship, I look for what is known now, how long it took overall to take the exam, and as you can see from my notes, it is 13 minutes for 50 questions that has 4 choices each. What questions they missed the most? Then I have to develop a plan to integrate these questions into my lessons. Things out of my control during this phase include apathy, prior knowledge, and misinformation gained through television and or social media. Looking at the HITS Guide to Teaching. Setting goals that are achievable is important. Students need to know that they can do what is necessary to be successful. When structuring lessons, it needs to evolve from one of the 2 higher level thinking strategies, Bloom's or Webb's depth of knowledge. I suggest if you use Webb's, just as I did with Bloom's, you share it with each learner ahead of time. Here, level 1, we have recall and reproduction, using definitions found in the Constitution as content and not rote, as well as chunking information. Level 2, basic application of skills and concepts. Students need to identify events that led to the creation of an amendment. Now, in Bloom's, this can be comprehension, but ideally, we would want to see a higher level of thought put here. For my dynamic, the students create their own picture book and tells the story of each amendment. Level 3, strategic thinking. What are your real world connections? How are you affected by the Fourth Amendment and privacy? And we even analyze Supreme Court decisions that affect students in high school. Finally, Webb's last level revolves around extended thinking. Students have a choice of creating a 28th usable amendment or creating a 30-second public safety announcement on one of our rights. For me, my preference will always be Bloom's. I see too many flaws with using Webb's, and it does not rely on moving up or down a slide rule of learning knowledge. Explicit teaching demonstrates good instructional goals and objectives, while giving the student an opportunity to ask questions. Clearly defined goals with an end result, begun with a bell ringer to start the learning process for the day. Anytime you can get a student to reflect on their learning, they are advancing through that established goal. The HITS worked example always has a purpose. Here is an amendment booklet example that outlines exactly what the students should focus on within the booklet. The name, which would be the amendment entitled, the description in their own words, and then an illustration of how they believe that amendment helps. Using worked examples reduces the cognitive load on students by focusing on the process of learning rather than the result. In turn, this boosts students' understanding and problem-solving skills. HITS collaborative learning happens all day, every day for our students. It is where learners work together to solve a problem or complete a task. To be successful, all students need to participate and contribute. In this example, the students take prior knowledge and apply it to modern problems with a modern fix. HITS multiple exposure. Students need to see information multiple times to ensure it lives in their long-term memory, but it has to have relevance, almost a personal feel, to be effective. HITS questioning. I have already discussed this previously. Whether you choose Bloom's taxonomy or Webb's depth of knowledge, student engagement and challenge is a must. But the type of questions you ask is equally important, and that the question should be carefully considered and serve a purpose. All answers should be treated equally, and all wrong answers should be redefined by a teaching moment. HITS feedback is considered beneficial when it is precise, timely, specific, accurate, and actionable. Unfortunately, we cannot provide instant feedback at all times, especially when dealing with essays or term papers. If we could do that, that would be the most impactful. So just providing appropriate feedback can increase student attainment and boost confidence. Metacognitive HIT strategies, as I've stated previously, include my segment where I teach critical thinking. It is okay to let the learners control their destiny with our guides, but let them utilize the tools necessary to getting an answer by teaching those tools. My 2 go-tos are the Venn diagram and Bloom's taxonomy. Tailoring instruction to meet the individual need of students is vital to cognitive learning. The goal here is to improve the content knowledge and skills of each student, regardless of any prior learning. This can be achieved by focusing on adapting the content, processes, products, or learning environment. Remember, not every learner grasps material the same way. So my dissemination of the same material 5 different ways, we can reach all learner types. The key here though is that we have to put the time into making various assessments per lesson. But what about formative assessments? I personally choose to use hand raising, Socratic discussion, and daily exit slips. Toward the end of my lesson, I incorporate Kahoot games to assess how much learning has occurred. Now, making my goal even smarter, I intentionally use real world examples that affect student behavior daily. From the vaping to the swearing to the disrespect, students are faced with issues on a daily occurrence. I help them find coping mechanisms and discuss the laws that guide their learning and their life. So I did see growth and achievement. However, my goal is to improve scores by at least 20% from the pre assessment. Each year, the test for pre assessment changes, but whichever test I use, it is used for both the pre and the post assessment for validity purposes. Last school year, the test scores improved 17%, which less than 3 students who did not pass. What do we do for those that just don't get it? There are enough formative assessments that any red flags would pop up or should pop up. However, if a student does not meet the threshold, then we can rely on online instruction, whether it's teacher created videos, resources, using the resource room and learning support teachers, as well as reteaching and retesting. There are a minimum of 20 attempts for success on this test, and of course, we could go more if we so choose. So now what? We need to continue to work as a team from elementary to secondary to ensure the mastery of information for Act 35. I will mention that this test does not have to be administered in the 10th grade year in government, but can be in any class subject of social studies, so we are truly all invested in this accomplishment. As for my next SMART goal, I'll apply towards the Advanced Placement World History class, so as time moves on, those students will be reinforced at least twice in their high school careers. Thank you very much for watching. I am Kevin J. Svidron.